And in respect of the time of the people who are here for the delegation, I'll give 2 more minutes if you want to bring them in so that we're ready to start as close to 1 o'clock as possible. We have a few things on the agenda today that we need to keep mindful of the time, so I don't want to delay. And I do have that M192 that I need to read, so I want to get that rolling. Okay. Welcome, Mr. Shepherd. Welcome, Ms. LoCicero. We are just about to begin. We do have a couple of housekeeping items that we need to take care of before we start your delegation, but thank you so much for being here at 1 o'clock. And
okay, you can hear me?
We can hear you. Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. CAO Helmer, are you fine if I start with the M192 at this time?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I've called this meeting to order, and this meeting of the board is being held virtually with all meeting participants attending via electronic communications in order to adhere to the provincial health officer's orders respecting physical distancing requirements as a measurement to prevent the transmission of COVID-19. Directors will be involved in and participate in the meeting. Directors are to identify themselves when advising the chair if they wish to be placed on the speakers list, and this will be done by raising your hand. The chair will record the order in which the hands are raised and will allow the directors to speak in the order in which they are recorded. If directors are unable to raise their hands due to being in audio mode, they will verbally advise the chair of their intention to speak. Directors will mute their device unless they wish to speak. The chair may also choose to mute the microphones, and the directors may unmute the microphones on their own accord when required. With respect to a vote, the directors are only required to state a nay vote. Directors attending the meeting are required to verbally advise the chair of when they leave the meeting and return to the meeting so that this can be recorded in the minutes. For clarity, if a director does not verbally advise the chair but is observed to be absent from their video feed, and their video feed remains turned on and it is unclear to staff whether they are present in the meeting, the director will be marked absent from the meeting until such time as staff observes the director to have returned. Directors will text message the CAO if they have any technical difficulty with their computer or telephone. If directors are unable to text the CAO, the director will email the chair. If a technical difficulty occurs and it becomes apparent that a director has become disconnected from the meeting will be recessed until the connection status of the director has been determined, at which time the meeting will be reconvened with or without the director present, so long as quorum is maintained. Directors who declare a conflict of interest in respect of an agenda item will be directed to the virtual waiting room while the board considers the agenda item. Once the item is complete, the director will be readmitted to the virtual meeting room. Directors who are present within the virtual waiting room are asked to stay at their computer or otherwise remain present and connected to their computer if possible for the entire duration of their time in the waiting room so as not to miss their readmittance into the virtual meeting room. And the chat function will be disabled unless it's impossible, but we are not to use the chat function for the purposes of this meeting. So thank you all for being here. Could I have someone move approval of the agenda? Moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Jewett. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay. And we are now going to hear from Jim Shepherd, Manager of Capital Projects, and Sabrina LoCicero, Community Relations for BC Hydro. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. Can you hear me okay? Great. And we do have some slides that we prepared and right on cue. There they are. Great. Okay, so yes, thank you again for having us this afternoon. My name is Sabrina Lo-Cicero. I'm with Community Relations at BC Hydro. And I'm joined with Jim Shepard, who is one of our capital projects managers. This presentation, it's one of our twice annual updates to the board to keep you up to date on the large volume of capital project work that's happening across the Bridge region. So it's a very high level update. So if there are any questions, or if there's more information wanted on any of these projects, just let us know. We're happy to follow up. If you can go to the next slide, please. Great. Yeah, so as I said, the focus of our update is on the capital plan, and we'll go through those projects today. But we also understand there's a number of interests related to that work. So we will be also talking about safety and workforce and accommodation and those things in relation to those projects. So it's a lot to cover, but maybe with that, I'll turn it over to Jim to start the presentation.
Can I get the next slide, please? Okay, this is actually a simplified sort of overview of the Bridge River system. Just sort of to bring your attention, we sort of have 3 dams within the system. That's the LaJoy Dam, that's one on your left-hand side. This Fizagi Dam, that's kind of in the middle, and then there's also the Seton Dam that's on the right-hand side. There's also 4 powerhouses. There's a powerhouse at LaJoy. There are 2 at the Bridge River, and there's actually 1 at Seton. And essentially what happens is the water flows from the Downton Reservoir, that's the one on the furthest left, through the LaJoy Dam into the Carpenter Reservoir. Then there's sort of 2 directions the water can go. The water can either go down the lower Bridge River or can go through the 2 tunnels and penstocks into 2 powerhouses into Seton Lake. Then it splits up either between along the Seton River into the Fraser River, or it goes through the Seton powerhouse and then again into the Fraser River. Next slide, please. Just keep myself here. Oops, one too many. Okay, so right now we're working on a couple of big projects over at Bridge River plants, starting with the generating station 1. BC Hydro is actually going to be bringing this project, the BR1 Unit 1 to 4 project, over to the BC Utilities Commission this summer. So we've actually been requested by the BC Utilities Commission to actually provide a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, that's a CPCN, for this project. And there's also a transmission project that's actually included in that, and I will actually discuss that project shortly. It's going to take us about 1 year, the BCUC, to do their review, which means that this project will not be able to do any significant work on the project until that time. If we're doing a CPCN, there's only a certain amount of work that we can actually do. We can't actually buy equipment. We can't do physical work because of the process within the BC Utilities Commission. So right now, the tentative timing for the completion of this project is 2030. What we're going to do is we're going to have 1 unit per year. So 2026, 2027, 2028, then 2029 is kind of the time frame for that. And also we're recoding the penstocks about the same time. So given that they're individual penstocks for each unit, we'll be doing the penstocks exactly at the same time as the generator projects. We've also got generator project 2. We're actually finishing up the second project at that facility, the 7 and 8 units. Project is actually going really well. We actually had a failure in one of the transformers. That's a Unit 7 transformer. This is actually a fairly new piece of equipment. It's about 16 years old. Normally they'll last well over 50 years. So that's actually going to delay the project a little bit. It was originally going to be completed in, I think it was actually going to be completed next month. Now it's being pushed off to sort of late 2021, possibly into early 2022. With the transformer, we're not too sure exactly what happened yet. We're actually investigating that right now. We've had to pull it out of its place. It's actually a fairly huge piece of equipment. We're actually going to be moving it, and then we're going to be investigating what's happened, and then either we are going to be repairing a transformer, moving it back down to Vancouver or wherever we need to move it to and fixing it, or we're going to scrap it. We're going to need we've got a spare transformer, so we're actually moving that spare transformer into place. And we're going to need about 40 working days after this transformer is replaced to get this Unit 7 running. And, sometime within 3 to 6 months, we will have that unit up and running. We're also starting the penstocks painting, doing a little bit of prep work and some small painting jobs this year, and the main job is going to be done next year. The next slide, please. This is Lillooet Dam. This is actually the largest project that we're kind of doing in this region. Again, right now we're in a stage where we're trying to figure out what the recommended leading alternative is. Right now we're working through a number of alternatives. I mean, we can look at decommissioning the dam. We can look at refacing the dam. We can look at refacing the dam and doing some work on that little the tunnel right there. Sorry, the inlet tunnel. So that's that big thing you sort of see off to the left of the dam. And when we do this work, because we have to get the entire face of the dam, all the way down to the bottom, we're going to draw that reservoir down as low as can possibly go. So where you can see this person standing, I mean, all of that area will be dry when we're going to do the dam. Also, given the way that the water flows, there's probably going to be a very specific time of year that we're going to be doing this. We're going to draw down the dam as much as possible so we can get at and do the work that we need to do. And again, that's targeting to start within 2028 and with a completion of 2032, and it's probably going to be done over those 4 years, so 2028, 2029, 2030, 2031. Okay, next slide, please. This is the Seton facility. This is actually one that's very, very close to Lillooet. We're going to be replacing the generator, probably starting in about 2026. But to allow this to happen, we need to get the water through the canal and into the Fraser River. Take a look at the picture off to the right. The canal is that little bit of water you see off to the right-hand side of the picture, and of course the Fraser River is off to the left. And how we're doing that is we're actually going to be putting in a bypass. So the bypass is going to start maybe a couple of 100 meters up from where the right-hand side of the picture is. It'll go to the top of that picture. So between the powerhouse and the houses over there, we'll have a canal or a penstock that'll actually run along there. That way we can take water from that canal, then put it into the Seton River. Right now we're in a really early stage. We need to take this project, given its size, over to our board of directors. And again, this will also go to the BC Utilities Commission because of the value of the project. There's also a smaller project. This is the dam safety project, which is the surge spill mitigation for the Bridge 1 facility. And that's targeted completion this summer. So it's only a couple of months. Next slide, please. Right now, we're currently working on replacing a transformer and distribution equipment. This is the distribution equipment that feeds the local area, Seton Portage and Shelath, over at Bridge 1. This is the picture. And we're also looking at a transformer at the Bridge River Terminal. As for the transmission line construction, this is fixing the transmission line that goes from the Bridge River plant across the Seton Lake, and then eventually works its way in through Lillooet and then up to Kelly Lake. This is actually being included in the CPCN for the Bridge River G1 to G4 project. This actually means that there's no substantial work on this project that can take place until at least the fall of 2022. Next slide, please. Safety. I'm going to go into a more detailed thing on safety, especially with COVID, because I mean, that's the biggest safety issue that we're sort of facing right now. But again, we do have policies in place for travel, working alone. We have a code of conduct, evacuation, policies and procedures. But also like to note that this has been a very safe year. And even though we have been in COVID conditions, we have had a significant amount of construction, and we've had the plant operators there during the weeks. And we've actually had no lost time incidents for the year. So that's actually a really good safety. Kudos for our team that are working up there. Next slide, please. So, I mean, I'm certain that since we're all not meeting in person, but we're actually meeting here virtually. I mean, this is, due to COVID, and Bridge River has a very, very strong protocols in place. You can read them all over, but we actually were selected because we have a lot of people in the camp setting. We actually were selected for the AstraZeneca vaccine deployment. So about a couple of weeks ago, Wednesday, March the 24th, we actually had 50 workers who were given their vaccine, so the first injection. Now, there was a hold on providing vaccines to those under 55 due to clotting concerns. So we had this process being put on hold for their second injections, but now that they've moved the age down to 40, we will probably bring in a group of people again. So, our policy is robust, and even though that many of our workers actually had this vaccine, we're actually still using all of the processes that you see in place. Masks are still in use. We've got stringent cleaning policies, social distancing, and we have our workers in pods so that if one person does happen to catch the COVID, she's got a very small group of people to pass it to. We're not going to be passing to a larger group. And we have every day, the workers have to go through 2 times where they are going to be noting that they are feeling well. So we have like a system, automatic system, that you just sort of sends a message to your manager that you're feeling okay and that you're safe to work. Next slide, please. Okay. A number of you have actually seen some of our presentations before, and we had some fairly large numbers of workers in the region. We had, 80, 100, 120 or more. Our workforce is going forward is actually not going to be as large as these past years, except for the work on the LaJoy Dam. We're still not sure exactly how many people we're going to be needing in that project. So right now, this year we're doing most of our work of the Bridge River plants. We're expecting to have about 50 people, and that's going to be between April and July. And it's actually, like I said, it's a smaller group of people than we normally have at the plant. And again, in 2022, we're going to be looking again. Most of the work is going to be happening in the Bridge River area. So again, we're looking at about 50 workers, and the work is going to happen between April and September. Next slide, please. Accommodations. We're still sort of keeping the same accommodations that we have over like the last few years. Any project that we have over at Bridge 1 and Bridge 2 and anywhere within the Bridge River area, we're going to be working in Seton, Portage, and Shelath, because we have room for about 85 people there. If we're actually doing projects over at Seton, including when we're doing a transmission line, we're going to basically accommodate the workers in the Lillooet area. Then in Lillooet, we usually use local houses or hotels. Next slide. And again, this is the sort of the accommodations where we're going to look at probably about 50 workers in 2021, 50 workers in 2022, and then about 30 workers in 2023. Next slide. And I'll pass you on to Sabrina.
Thanks, Jim. So just a couple things to highlight. So that is the bulk of the presentation on the capital project work. Wanted to also draw your attention to a few more things before we conclude. One being the status of our recreation sites, as it's now spring and the weather is definitely improving, at least where I am. So we are preparing to open those again this spring, but it is another summer where we are in the COVID-19 pandemic. So just want to flag that we will continue to have some safety measures in place at those sites. And if there are ever any questions about the status of those sites, if they're open or how they're open and what practices are there, we have a bchydro.com/recreation. We'll have the latest information. And those are the rec sites in the bridge area we've listed there. Next slide, please. Also, a reminder about community investment activities. We do this year, again, have 2 scholarships for Lillooet Secondary School students, $500 for those looking to study STEM or trades training. Applications will be accepted until May 17th, and we are currently in the process of reviewing our grant applicants for this year, so we hope to have some news on that in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. And one more item before we close, Cheakamus Water Use Plan Order Review. So that is now underway for the Cheakamus watershed and our operations in that system. The map there on the right just flags that area for you. You'll see Squamish up towards the bottom. And then as you follow the highway up, you'll see Daisy Lake Dam and the Cheakamus Powerhouse. So that watershed underwent a water use planning process back in the early 2000s. And there have been some orders in place. The water use plan orders were implemented in 2006. We've now completed a number of studies in relation to those orders, and we'll be reviewing those over the next year. So the timeline there is on the left, and we do have a website we'll update regularly, bchydro.com/Cheakamus Watershed, and we'll look at keeping the board informed as well as that process moves forward. And next slide. And as a reminder, we have a number of communications tools, all virtual these days, but they are continuing to be used through the pandemic. So just a reminder there. And that should be the last slide. I think we can open it up to questions if we have time.
Thank you very much for that excellent presentation. Director Demare has a question. Go ahead.
Sabrina, what is the status of the TELUS cell service for the Terzaghi Dam? Has there been any progress on that?
I haven't had an update on that. I can follow up on that for you and get some information. I don't have an update ready for you today, but I can follow up.
Okay, thank you. This question is for Jim. At the presentation that we had out here, it was, of course, it was virtual, but we went through all the slides on the different proposals for La Joy Dam. How close is BC Hydro to coming up with a final recommendation on what to do there?
Sorry, I missed part of your question. So can you say it again, please?
Yeah, for the La Joy Dam, there's 3 or 4 different outcomes to what BC Hydro is going to do to it. And I thought it was going to be fairly early in 2021 that BC Hydro would make the decision on the final verdict. How close is BC Hydro to that verdict on the recommendation?
I know I was talking to the project manager, and they were talking about sometime in the spring, they would get to a point where we would be able to take that information and then present it to, I'm assuming they're going to be presenting to the board. So right now they're working through it, and they're fairly close. So it's going to be probably in the next couple of months, unless you heard something different, Sabrina.
I was just going to add to that and say, yes, I think that's still the case. I think the open house we had the end of last year, we talked about completing a number of studies, and I think they've been taking that information and going through an assessment process, a structured decision-making process. And I think they're still there. They're getting closer though, and I think they're anticipating this spring, probably later this spring. But we'll give you an update when we have a more specific timeline, but it should be soon.
Okay, thank you.
And sorry, that would be for the recommended leading alternative. That's the next step there.
Yeah, thank you.
Director Birch-Jones, go ahead.
Hey, thank you, and hello to both of you, and thanks. You guys are great at answering my questions on email all the time, quickly. And I was really happy to talk to a fellow from Sequamish who was telling me that our Seton campground will be open this season. I think he said as of May 5th. That's terrific, because at least there's some services there. Great, thank you. And I just want to double check on something that I think I heard Jim say. Are you talking about running a penstock from the canal into the Seton River? Did I hear that right, while work's being done on the canal?
No, what it is while work is being done on the unit, what we're planning on doing, the biggest thing that we're seeing right now is that unit is a significant bottleneck within our Bridge River system.
Right.
And what we're looking at right now is to actually allow water to bypass the Seton powerhouse and then allow water to be put into the Fraser River. Yeah. So that means that it's beneficial. If we have a problem, we don't have to spill as much water down the Seton River. So we're just sort of trying to make sure that we can keep the water flow right now that we have, which is put about 135 or 140 CMS through the powerhouse right now, and then probably around 15 to the river. If we don't have that, we'd actually have to push all of that water through the river. that make sense?
Yes, maybe think hard about where the water gets released, because as you would know from lots of studies that have been done, there's salmon that are confused by that water and they waste time trying to go up, a dead end versus going up the actual Seton and Cayuse Creek system. And we're talking about the gates, the sockeye, and that's
Yeah, no,
yeah, okay. So
no,
just,
we do understand that, and
yeah.
that's one of the things that we're really trying to work through is exactly how that's going to function.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And actually sorry, do you have another question?
No, you have Director Jewett, but if you want to finish your thought.
Actually, I actually talked to the local plant manager while we were discussing, while we're having our question, and he is noting that the Celson is in progress, but not moving very fast. They said that construction could start as early as July. That's just a bit of an update, but we'll dig into that further for you.
Director Jewett, go ahead. Thank you. I know there's similar concerns with the Daisy Lake Dam into the Squamish River system, but my question is more along the lines of the siltation of the system. Is this reducing the lifespan of the gear in the dams?
I'm not too sure exactly what you're asking.
Well, you're doing a refit of a lot of the generator replacement in Seton, and some anyway. Is the glacial siltation having an effect on your equipment?
I'm going to have to go a little technical on you. Do you mind?
Go for it.
Okay. The biggest concern that we really have with the glacial siltation is actually for the Bridge River 1, Bridge River 2 power plants. And that is because there's Carpenter Lake and Seton Lake are about 1,100, 1,200 feet difference in elevation. So what we do is that water goes down that distance and then it comes out of very high pressure because of that distance. And so we've actually designed the Bridge River facility to handle silty as all get out water. We've got a special type of turbine in there. It's called a Pelton. A Pelton turbine, imagine a bunch of buckets and 6 fire hoses around in a ring, and the bucket or the fire hoses shoot at the buckets, and it just spins the whole thing around. Normally, you expect to see a generator as a Francis unit, just like almost like a big impeller that the water kind of goes into, and then it just sort of swirls around and then goes down. Those are a lot more susceptible to silt versus the Peltons. The Peltons are just very, very strong. You don't really notice the siltation at all. In fact, we're not planning on replacing the runners, those things that actually get hit by the water. We're actually replacing the generators themselves, which are the electrical pieces of equipment above the runners, and they're getting pretty old. It's like, if you've got 60 or 70-year-old house wiring, it's definitely probably time to replace it.
Right. I was just thinking, because I have been to the Bridge Glacier, that there is quite a bit of recession, and there's I would imagine higher silt loads, and just wondering how often you're going to have to do these kind of activities, given the changes, especially with climate change.
Again, the facility was actually designed anticipating that there would be high silt loads. So there isn't an issue with our facilities, generating facilities.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you both for being here to present. I don't want to cut this short, but we do have another delegation that's on hand. And so if there are any further questions, we'll be sure to forward those along to you via email. We appreciate how open you are to communication, and we look forward to your next presentation to the board. With that, could I have someone move receipt of the report? moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Demare. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Have a lovely
Thank you.
afternoon. We'll see you again. Okay, we have to go back to 4.1 to approve the motion because I read the lengthy motion, but we need someone to approve it. Thank you. Moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Demare. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And we are moving ahead in the agenda because we have 8.1.2, which is a request for decision on the Pemberton Meadows Electoral Area C Development Variance Permit number 162, which was put on the agenda. And we have Director Needham here. We do have the architect, I believe. Yes, thank you. Mr. Doak is on deck for us to ask questions as this was referred back from the EAD with request for more information. So with that, welcome Director Needham. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Did you want a presentation from me?
I think it would be helpful for context for the directors that aren't at the EAD.
Okay, hi. It's Kim Needham, Director of Planning and Development at the SLRD. This application was brought forward to the EAD, and the EAD had some questions. Subsequent to the meeting, staff have received several letters of support from near neighbors. So we have now received 4 letters of support from neighbors and 1 letter from a near neighbor who was opposed. We have also received further information from the applicant, Mr. Doak, and his clients, providing some more details about the setbacks, etc. Staff have conducted a site meeting, and we are now making the rare decision, we don't do this very often, to change our recommendation. And previously we had recommended not supporting this because the main letters that we were receiving was actually from the one person who is opposed. Since that time, we've looked at the site more. We've looked at the, we've received some more information. There is a significant tree buffer between the person opposed and this application. The garage to which the variance is being requested is already there. If the applicant were to move the garage further back on the property, they would actually be more obtrusive and more visible to the near neighbor, although that would not require a variance. And so having received more information and thought about this more, we are now recommending that this application be supported.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions from anyone on the board for Director Needham or to attendees? Go ahead, Director Mack.
So Director Needham, so what you're saying now is that after doing some further investigation, staff is comfortable with moving this forward. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, well, I'll make that motion that we do that. Thank you.
Okay, so we have moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Richmond. Is there any further discussion? Or you can also ask questions if you prefer. Seeing none, I appreciate the work that went into this report. The photos were extremely helpful, and the supporting letters from the neighbors also very compelling. So I appreciate all of the work that went into this reconsideration. Are there any other comments from anyone? Go ahead, Director Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that this is the 3 that are on the agenda, including the notwithstanding resolution to have the applicants attend in front of the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that the SLRD approved the issuance of a development variance permit for the property legally described as laid out in the report. for a minimum interior side parcel line setback from 7.5 to 4.2 for a total variance of 3.3 meters, that the CAO be authorized to sign the permit, and that notwithstanding the SLRD planning policy 14-2019, Crosland Oak, the architect working on the DVP, may appear on behalf of the applicants and present to the board, which we did not need, but thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. So those three, we have them moved and seconded. Anyone opposed? Go ahead, Director Clark.
Sorry, and since Ms. Isles is here, we would include her in that, along with Mr. Doak, just to add, we'll add her name in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And thank you both for being here. Have a lovely afternoon. Okay, so now we're going back in the agenda to done 4.1. We've done our delegation of 5.1. We are now on the consent agenda. Could I have someone move the consent agenda as laid out? Moved by Director Stoner, second by Director Elliott. Is there any discussion? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none. Okay, we are now on 8.1. 8.1.1, which is a request for decision on the Britannia Beach electoral area development variance permit application 159. And Director Needham, are you planning to speak to this?
Yeah, sure. I can speak to this. You'll notice that we've also included a cover letter here, as we had received some further correspondence from neighbors. One of the neighbors raises a number of issues that staff have been challenged to sort of determine, the veracity of some of the claims. There was a claim made about the building not addressing the disclosure statement. Well, the disclosure statement is not something that the SLRD is privy to. It's an agreement or an original disclosure that was made by the developer. There's also a building scheme that was referred to. Again, that is with the developer. And the buildings at Britannia do have to adhere by a building scheme that McDonald Development Corp addresses, and they review the designs of the buildings to ensure that they're compliant. So that's not something that is an SLRD issue. We feel that the setback is quite minor in nature, and it's actually an improvement from the current situation. There's a mobile or manufactured home on the property that does have currently an encroachment of 2 meters. So we feel that this setback is an acceptable setback. So just thought I'd add that information.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Seeing no questions, is there anybody that would like to move the recommendation? Moved by Director Jewett, seconded by Director Stoner. Are there any comments? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Great, thank you very much. We are moving along to 8.2. And these are, it's just one piece of correspondence regarding the Nairn Falls parking lot. Could I have someone move receipt of the correspondence and what was the action here? Oh, right. I had it moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Stoner. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right. Okay, we're waiting for Mr. Kyobe to be admitted into the meeting for 9.1, which is a request for decision regarding 2510 Summit Road in Area C, a zoning amendment bylaw, a reduction of the minimum parcel size for third reading. Just to introduce the topic for the sake of those that may be here. Good afternoon, Mr. Coyote. Welcome. Go ahead, CEO Helmer.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify for 8.2.1 it sounded like you were asking for us to just move receipt. Was the intention to move receipt or the recommendation?
It was the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. 9.1. And is Director Needham speaking to this or Mr. Coyote?
I'll speak to it. Hello, everyone. David Kobe, planner with SLRD. I just wanted to give you a bit of a reminder about this application we received. So we received a zoning amendment application for a property at 2510 Summit Road in Area C. The property is currently zoned Rural 1, and the proposed zoning amendment is to facilitate subdivision of the parcel into 2 lots. And it would see the property rezoned to rural residential subzone, thereby reducing the minimum parcel size to 1 hectare. This bylaw was given second reading and a public hearing waiver at the March 24th board meeting. As per local government regulations, a public hearing waiver was advertised in the April 8th and April 15th editions of the Peak News magazine. Additionally, neighbors within 150 meters of the subject property also received a notification in the mail. And a rezoning sign has been posted on the property since the fall of 2020. As of this morning, no comments have been received. Therefore, staff recommending that the bylaw be given third reading and sent to MOTI for approval prior to adoption.
Excellent. Super concise. Are there any questions for staff? Seeing no questions, would anyone like to make the motion as laid out? Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Elliott. Any further discussion? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. 9.2, this is a request for decision for zoning amendment bylaw 1692-2020 in electoral area A. Yep, we've got Director Needham and Mr. Coyote here for this. And I imagine these could be dealt with the 3 that's together.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so we've seen this before. This is the housekeeping amendments and retaining wall amendments to the to the zoning bylaws. Are there any questions? Go ahead. No. Would you like to move it, Director Elliott? Moving by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Jewett. Do you have a question, Director Jewett? Go ahead.
Yeah, we just passed a similar bylaw in Whistler, but using different numbers. So the 2.5 meters is higher than what we went for. We went 1.2 by 1.2. Just wondering why you went for the higher number.
I can speak to that. I think we conducted a best practice review of what was done in other jurisdictions, and I think 2.5 was the number that was most cited. Director Needham, if I'm incorrect, could you please clarify?
Yeah, I can also add to that the lots in Whistler tend to be small, usually less than 800 square meters. The lots in the SLRD tend to be quite a bit larger in size, so there's a lot more room for retention, which does take up some space. So I think it was sort of more of a rural standard.
Right, and it's less next to the property line. It goes back down to 1.2 at the property line. I think I read that. Just curious.
Okay, question, Director Birch-Jones.
More of a reminder, just a discussion that Director Kim Needham and I had on email, and I just wanted to remind you that there was a request for some of the discussion that occurred with the previous building inspector around seasonal and temporary buildings to be posted as guidelines to maybe help future applicants work through that. And I think I do believe that you committed to doing that at some time in the hopefully not too distant future, as just to help with things like temporary fruit stands and so forth. Just wanted to remind you of that.
Is that helpful? Okay, great. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Are there any other comments to this? We've had it moved and seconded. Go ahead, Director Demare.
No, yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. 9.3, which is a zoning amendment for McGillivray Falls in Area C, and this is to be adopted. We've gone through this a few times, but are there any questions for staff? Seeing no questions, could I have someone make the motion as laid out? Moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Mack. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we are on 10.1. Sorry, did I miss something? Oh, Tony, you're not muted right now.
Oh, so I think
Yeah, thank you. And we'll go to CAO Helmer for a verbal, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just one thing today. I just wanted to express how pleased we are to welcome Devin Pollock back as our Wild Safe BC Community Coordinator for his second year this year. And he will be building upon the regional successes that we had last year to deliver outreach and education with the aim of preventing human wildlife conflict and providing residents with the information that they need to keep themselves and the wildlife safe this year. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much and welcome back. 10.2, we have Director Needham and Mr. Coyote to speak to the temporary use permit for the Twin River Gravel Company.
motion to receive.
Okay, motion to receive by Director Richmond. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Director Birch Jones. Question, Director Jewett, or comment?
Yeah, just noticing that the TUP doesn't mention restricting the operation to Monday to Friday, though it looked like it was recommended earlier in the report. It just has hours of operation. It doesn't say anything about what days of the week.
If I can answer, I believe the draft TUP attached to the report stipulates that it's weekdays only from 7 to 5 p.m.
Yeah, it says weekdays 7 to 5.
Weekday. Okay, my apologies.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'll call, oh, go ahead, Mr. Coyote.
I would just like to give you a bit of an overview of this application and what's transpired since it last came to the board.
Oh, please, thank you. It got moved too quickly.
Yeah, quite a few things have come up, so we probably should go through it. So we received this TUP application for a temporary mobile concrete plant on a parcel located at 100 Gravel Road. This is an existing mining tenure, and the proposal is to transfer the concrete plant from Pemberton Industrial Park to the subject location, so it could efficiently serve both Pemberton and Whistler. So at the February 24th board meeting, the board instructed staff to give notice to the TUP that will be considered at the March 24th board meeting. Staff actually rescheduled it to today's meeting to provide more time to get comments and feedback from the public as well as our partner agencies. So the notice was advertised in the March 11th and April 8th editions of the Peak News magazine, and residents within 150 meters of the subject property were also notified. And we also referred it to the Resort Municipality of Whistler, the Village of Pemberton, and the Lillooet First Nations. The Lillooet First Nations and none of the municipalities had any concerns or comments. We did receive 2 letters from neighboring properties. One was not opposed to the TUP in principle, and the other was. They both requested amendments to the hours of operation. So currently the draft TUP states from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. So based on the comments we received, we're proposing amending that from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekdays as well. So that's one of the key things that I wanted to highlight for the board. As well as the neighbor who was opposed to this TUP is the same neighbor that was opposed to a similar TUP from 2013 that was for an asphalt plant at the same location. And the concerns that were raised in 2013 mirror those concerns that were raised about this application. The first one being was that there was an unauthorized landfill operations in the immediate area of this application. And in 2013, SLRD staff notified the Ministry of Forest, Lands and Natural Resources to verify whether or not there were any landfill operations in this area. So 2 inspectors went out there and they weren't able to, we weren't able to find any unauthorized landfill or any burning of imported wood, which was some of the issues that was highlighted in the comments. Additionally, the neighbor had concerns about wetlands on the site, as well as underground water management and impacts to the local Green River. So again, these were the same issues that were raised in 2013 and raised today. So in 2013, the Ministry of Lands and Mines were notified by the SRD about these potential wetland issues. And the Squamish Field Office for the ministries wasn't aware of any wetlands on the site. And it also noted that, just because there's standing water in the area, that doesn't constitute a wetland for conservation standards. Furthermore, the Ministry of Energy and Mines stated that any such water management issues are reviewed and addressed whenever Twin River renews its mine quarry tenure. And in terms of issues such as spills and noxious chemicals, Twin River is required to have an emergency response plan, and this has to be approved by the Ministry of Energy and Mines. Other issues that were raised included emissions and air quality. And again, in order for the mine to operate, emissions monitoring and air quality testing are done quarterly, and they must meet the standards set out by the Environmental Management Act. The emissions tests are conducted by an external consultant and submitted to the Ministry of Energy and Mines and the Ministry of Environment, and they could also be referred to the SLRD if requested. So these are some of the main issues that the neighbor highlighted in terms of their opposition to the TUP. And other things that are really worth noting is that the existing mine tenure has currently expired. However, it's under review by the Ministry of Forest, Lands and Natural Resources. And as part of their review, they look at these ecological environmental issues. And SLRD staff reached out to the ministry today to notify them of some of the concerns that neighbors have in terms of the environmental impacts. And they asked us to forward that over to them. And once they have that information, their ecosystem team will review and investigate some of these issues that was highlighted by the neighbor. And finally, we should also note that granting the TUP doesn't necessarily authorize operations. The final decision rests with the province, and they're currently reviewing the application for the mobile concrete plant at this location. So based on this information, we're recommending that the TUP be issued and authorized.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any questions? We've already moved. Go ahead, Director Richmond.
So just to be clear, I don't know if I'm considered the mover. I was actually moving receipt of the CAO's previous report before that. I think that's why this kind of got accelerated. And
Thank
a bit
you.
of a delay here. So earlier I was moving that, so I wasn't moving this until we had heard from staff. So, but now that we have, I would be happy to move it with the amended time.
Okay.
7 to 4.
Thank you. Okay.
Second it.
Seconded by Director Mack. Are there any further questions or comments on this topic? Go ahead, Director Rainbow, then Director Birch-Jones. You're muted, Tony.
I'm sorry. There we go. In the letter, the people wrote that objecting to this, they cite some environmental concerns. So my question would be, if this thing goes through and it's up and running, who's responsible for monitoring what happens there? Is that our responsibility, or is that the province's responsibility?
From my, excuse me, if I may, Chair, from my understanding, this is the province responsibility. So currently, the mining tenure is there's an application to renew the mining tenure, and as part of that review, they evaluate environmental impacts. And now that we also highlighted that neighbors have these concerns as well, they're specifically going to have their ecosystem team on board to review these, and that is part of their overall process. And they're also reviewing the applications to allow a temporary concrete plant in this area as well. So that's a separate process. So unless they approve that, then the mine operation won't happen. So our TUP doesn't necessarily allow the applicant to start operating.
Okay.
Director Birch-Jones had a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just am curious, does staff ever ask to see copies of what the remediation plan is like? I realize that's the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon, but do they include you in seeing those plans or having a hand? My experience with how these sorts of things are rehabilitated is that, at least in Area B, not very well. So I wondered if we could have a bit of control over that.
Director Needham, if you could speak to sort of our historical approach to.
Yeah, typically we are not engaged in remediation plans. The province has mining engineers and environmental professionals that would typically handle that on the provincial side.
To see you have a little bit of a lever here if you weren't happy with the sort of quality of those plans, but that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments for staff? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion to approve this TUP. Go ahead, Mr. Coyote.
I just wanted to highlight the change in time of operation in the draft TUP. Yeah. So if you could approve it with that amendment from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Weekdays.
Weekdays, correct.
Got it. Okay, so that was moved by Director Richmond, seconded by Director Demare. I'm going to call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And so no one jump ahead and confuse me. 10.3, we're looking at a foundation permit issuance authorization for the Britannia Oceanfront Development Corporation commercial project. And I believe Director Needham is going to speak to this.
Yeah, sure. The board previously authorized foundation permits for buildings 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 8. And the applicant has now come back to us and said, oh, we need building number 3 as well. So we are requesting a foundation permit for building 3 in advance of the construction of the riprap walls, which are required before full building permits can be issued. And this is for the buildings that are sitting up on footings right now at Britannia Beach. And really it's a safety issue to get those onto some foundations.
Great. Are there any questions? Seeing no questions. Go ahead, Director Demare.
I'll move it.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Moved by Director Demare, seconded by Director Rainbow. Are there any comments? I appreciate the work in the report. And I'm going to call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And we have Ms. Westerholm here to speak to 10.4. Good afternoon, Ms. Westerholm. Welcome. Thank you for being here today. And you're going to share the information report regarding the community-to-community forum funding for the new Quintual regional gathering.
Hi, everyone. Patricia Westerholm, Communications and Engagement Manager for the SLRD. And yes, I am here to speak to the information report and answer any questions that you may have regarding the community to community forum funding for the new Quintual regional gathering. You will note in the report that the initial funding for this most recent C2C forum was received in the fall of 2018 for an event to be produced on or before March 31st, 2019. Unfortunately, it was not possible to hold the event prior to that deadline, so we withdrew our funding application at that time and reapplied for the next intake. And that application was successful, and we began planning for the event that was scheduled to take place on March 23rd, 2020. However, due to the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, it was not possible to hold the event. And at the time, there were several communities that were in the same situation where they had received their grant applications had been approved. However, they had not been able to hold the event prior to the onset of the pandemic. So that program, the funding for that program was rolled over into the next intake. So anyone with an approved application was just bumped into the next intake. So we did not have to reapply. But the expectation was that the event would happen on or before March 31st of the following year, which was this year. And of course, at the time, we didn't know to what extent we'd be dealing with the pandemic and for how long. So now with continued restrictions around non-essential travel and not being able to meet in person, we have not been able to host the event at this time. So that brings us to today and the next funding intake with applications being accepted for the 2021-2022 Community to Community Forum program. And our intention is to bring back a more comprehensive report to the board with regard to our First Nations relations activities and anticipating that we would, in that report, also make a recommendation to submit an application to that 2021-2022 C2C forum program intake. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? Seeing none. Could I have someone make a motion to receive the report? Moved by Director Richmond, seconded by Director Jewett. Any further discussion? Or any no questions, no comments? I'll call the question. Is everyone opposed? Motion carries. Did you want to say something, Director Birch-Jones?
I certainly didn't want to oppose that, although that's exactly when I put my hand up. I'm just really happy that maybe we might be able to move along with this at the next intake, where we have some work that's so overdue in the north. We'll get there. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Westerholm, for being here today to present this. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we are waiting for Ms. Director LaFrance to come in for 10.5. I do just want to make a heads up. We have a delegation for the Sea to Sky Regional Hospital District at 2:30, and it is not someone we can delay with. So I believe we will be recessing this open meeting to conduct that portion of this regional hospital district. So we're rolling with the punches today, folks, but there's a lot of agendas and a lot of items to deal with at specific times. And so I appreciate your patience and welcome Director LaFrance for being here for 10.5. And you're going to present on the Restart Grant update.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Suzanne LaFrance, the Director of Finance, and I have our information report on the provincial government's Safe Restart Grant. So in 2020, in November, the RD received, I believe, I have to double check. I can't even remember these numbers right now. So the RD received 502,000, and that was November 19th in 2020. And that was just a portion of what the province had set aside for the Safe Restart Grant. And on March 22nd, just prior to the board adoption of the financial plan, the province of BC released the remaining 10 million just to the regional districts, and that allocation ended up being 125,000 to the SLRD. So now there is a total of $627,000 available for the SLRD's Safe Restart grant. And I've added the information that was attached to the budget discussions. So in 2020, we had spent some of this restart grant already, which was $153,551. And in the budget, there was an allocation of the full amount remaining, but with the discussion on the board budgets, there was 179,930 that we would definitely look at using for the same reasons as was done in 2020, for supplies and for revenue loss and for IT items that were already brought to the board. So there are funds remaining, about 293,000 for additional projects that the board may wish to review. At this time, we haven't had a large discussion with the management team to drill down what projects can be done. But I put through some samples or some potential projects at the end of the report, including additional SLRD office renovations, IT projects, which I think will be utilized this year. So we're looking at Office 365 switch, which we have done, which will bring our email into the cloud. We are looking at broadband connectivity improvements, and potentially once the new financial system is being upgraded, we'll add on potentially online payments. And obviously there could be additional recreation facility support. So we have the Pemberton District Recreation Center, the Lillooet Recreation Center, and the Brennan Park Pool, all are services of the SLRD. And there's also the option to use some funds to build our business continuity planning a little stronger. So we started this last year when the pandemic started, but there is potential for having a consultant come in and just beef up our plan. So there's also Area C Transit revenue loss and service support. I don't think that will be needed this year, but things will change obviously throughout the year. And there's support to local nonprofit organizations that for food security and support for vulnerable persons, which is applicable as well. And then any other projects that might come down the pipe that could be applicable. So the plan is to kind of see how the year progresses, but if the board wants to make priority suggestions, we can go with that as well, and then take that priority listing and drill down into what projects we could be doing this year. But yeah, this report in conclusion is just to notify the board of the additional amount that we received.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Director Demare, go ahead.
Just curious, with the tax services that we have here in the Bridge River Valley, if any of them lost revenue because of COVID, would they be eligible? Like I see you've got the recreation centers and stuff like that, but I'm just wondering any of the other tax services within the regional districts, electoral areas, I mean, would they be eligible?
Potentially, I'd have to review all of their details. A lot of the services are contribution only, so they're not operator controlled by us. So it's a separate society I'd have to look at what that means for us to provide revenue loss to them. It's potential though. I'd have to look into it a little deeper because
Okay.
it's not run by SLRD, even though it's taxed by the constituents.
I would like to also, as we've done in the EAD, is to, with the general select funds, where we all contributed to the food banks, local food banks in the regional districts, definitely would want to use some of this funds for the same purpose. Kind of.
Okay. Question, Director Jewett.
Is there any criteria? Are you required to account for expenditures within a certain criteria?
Yeah, so there are eligibility criteria. Basically, it's near the beginning of the report. This is what the province has set out. It just has to address revenue shortfalls, facility reopening and operating costs, emergency planning and response costs, bylaw enforcement and protective services like fire protection and police, computer and other electronic technology costs, services for vulnerable persons, and other related costs. So basically, if you can relate the cost to the COVID pandemic response or recovery, that would be covered. We do have to report on these items based on what type of service, like basically within the financial statements, there is a statement that is required saying, you know, we offered this much for revenue shortfalls, this much for IT. So we do have to report on these funds to the province through the financial statements, as well as another financial report. I believe that's coming down the pipe.
All right. I certainly agree with Director Demare about supporting food security throughout the SLRD with some of this money. And I know that in municipal government, we've had revenue shortfalls that have certainly been difficult. I noticed also in the financials, which we haven't okayed yet, but a shortfall for the Squamish pool, for instance. And I'm sure there's other recreational facilities in the communities that have also had shortfalls, as well as the Area C transit. So I would support money going towards those.
So Director LaFrance, this is an opportunity for you to share the information on just the amount that we've got. Is there a planned time when you'd like to discuss how the money will, or is staff going to come back with a report on how that money can be allocated based on the need?
Yeah, the CAO and I have basically discussed that and feel it's still a little early, but yeah, we hope to come back with actual projects. And you know, for the nonprofit organizations, I think we can work on those now. But for the bigger projects like the IT, we'll have to drill down into those a bit more.
Okay. Was there a question from Director Birch-Jones?
Oh, I got pretty excited thinking about some of the possibilities for recreation. And so I look forward to seeing the plan, because obviously we can't do all the brainstorming at this meeting, but with a few more parameters and some sense of the quantities of money we're talking about in the different areas, I could certainly come up with lots of good ways to spend it.
This isn't new spending though. This is to make up the gaps. So I think that staff will need to come back with a report on where the gaps are. So don't go spending that money right now until we know.
Okay, Chair Ford.
Thank you. Okay, so now that we've, can I have someone move receipt of the report? Moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Birch-Jones. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. And 10.6, we're looking for a request for decision for our audited financial statements. And moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Elliott. Are there any questions at this time? Any comments at this time? Go ahead, Director Clark, and then I see Director Jewett.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out that the resolutions aren't on the agenda cover, but they are the recommendations that are attached to the staff report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the options are to approve and authorize the chair and treasurer to sign the financial statements as presented, or to not approve. And the motion, as I understood it, is to approve. The mover and seconder are fine with that. Is there any discussion? Director Elliott, I see you unmute yourself.
Well,
Go
it's
ahead.
just Director Jewett wanted to ask a question.
Sorry, thank you. Director Jewett, go ahead.
Thank you. Just wondering about the Squamish Community Pool, because there was quite an accumulated deficit. Is that a accounting exercise that I might not be aware of?
Great question.
So that is the back of the statements, right? Where it's the separate
Exactly.
statements for each.
Trying to figure out which page I found. Oh, here it is. It is page 72 on the document, and 75 in our package.
So that is due to the way we have to show our tangible capital assets off of the financial statements. So like in the balance sheet and not in the revenue and expenses any longer. So that surplus deficit at the end of the year of 2020 of $849,688 is then divided down below into the actual surplus available, which is the cash basis. So that would be the actual revenues minus the capital spend. And then the underneath is what's invested in tangible capital assets. And that's that $1 million and 817 contra revenue, which makes it a deficit. So it's basically just the way that we've had to take the capital assets off of the books and place them into this invested in tangible capital assets. But there is $151,129 opening as a surplus for this in 2021.
Thank you.
Was there another question from anybody? Director Rainbow, did you have a question?
No, sorry, no.
Okay. Where are we at? Do we have a mover and a seconder for this approval? Yes. Any further discussion or comments? I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I'm sorry I interrupted like that, Chair. This whole thing was reminding me of why I got a low mark in accounting. I find it very difficult to follow this stuff.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on 11.1, correct, Director Clark? We're on the board roundtable. Now, we have 11 minutes until our delegation. I don't think we'll finish this in 11 minutes. We do have to change links, am I correct? Shall we take a recess to allow that to happen, and we'll come back in our next link for the regional hospital district. This is challenging for Director Birch-Jones and Director Demare because you're not included in the regional hospital district. So I'd like to hear from Director Clark on what you'd like to do. I do see you, Director Birch-Jones, but Director Clark has something to say on the flow.
Thanks, Chair. We do have a delegation calling into the other link, so we will have to go to that one. Yeah. And so I'm going to have to end this meeting because I can't open two meetings at once. So our northern directors will have to call. Everybody's going to have to call back in, but the northern directors will have a bit of a break, and then they will call back in when we're done with the hospital district, just that shorter delegation portion.
Okay, so Director Birch Jones, Director Demare, Director Jewett, go.
I need instructions as to how long we Northerners go away for.
I'm going to say it's about a half an hour.
Okay, thank you.
Can we say 3 o'clock? Director Demare, go ahead.
Yeah, Kristen, you'll email us. Let us know it's time to come back. Or
Yeah.
just re-click on the link and wait for you to admit us.
Yes, I will do my best to email you.
One of us will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Director Jewett, go ahead.
Yeah, I think originally what Director Crompton and I had said is that he would attend, but since I'm here, I will. And then I will have to leave at 3:45, and Director Crompton said he would come back in.
Okay, I think we're okay. I see CAO Helmer. We have a hard stop at 4 o'clock today, so we won't need Crompton back, I don't think. But CAO Helmer, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out we did have another, we had another delegation for the hospital district as well at 3 o'clock. So
yes,
I think
we do.
if we just email or contact the Northern directors offside, that might be the easiest.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, everybody leave and come back in on the regional hospital district link feed.
I will need that link.
The
Okay.
open one.
The open one. Open.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.